Classical conditioning is a type of learning where a living organisms learn to link an event with another, resulting in a specific behavior. This idea was first discovered by Ivan Pavlov, a Russian scientist, while he was studying how dogs digest food. Pavlov's experiment showed how animals, and even people, learn to expect and respond to things based on past experiences. Hi, my name is Dr. Kettle and welcome to Kettle Academy. Pavlov's famous experiments involved watching how much saliva dogs produced when they were given food. He noticed that the dogs not only salivated when they saw food but also when they saw the food bowl or heard footsteps of the people who fed them. This was unusual because these things, the bowl or footsteps, normally wouldn't make a dog salivate. Pavlov called these responses psychic secretions and wanted to understand why they happened. In his experiments, Pavlov would ring a bell right before giving the dogs food. At first, the bell didn't mean anything to the dogs, but after hearing the bell many times before getting the food, the dogs began to salivate just from the sound of the bell, even when no food was given. This meant the bell had become a conditioned stimulus and the salivation became a conditioned response. The dogs learned to connect the bell with getting food and the salivation became automatic when the dogs heard the bell. There are a few key ideas that explain how classical conditioning works. 1. Unconditioned stimulus. This is something that naturally causes a reaction. In Pavlov's experiment, the unconditioned stimulus was the food which made the dog salivate. 2. Unconditioned response. This is the automatic reaction to the unconditioned stimulus, the dog salivating when they got food. 3. Conditioned stimulus. This is something that didn't cause a reaction before, but after being paired with the unconditioned stimulus, it starts to cause a reaction. In Pavlov's case, the bell became the conditioned stimulus. 4. Conditioned response. This is the learned response to the conditioned stimulus. After learning, the dog salivated when they heard the bell. Classical conditioning happens in everyday life, not just in labs. For example, it is used in therapy to help people unlearn bad habits or fears. Cancer patients often experience classical conditioning during chemotherapy. They might feel nauseous from the treatment, and after a while, they start to feel sick when they simply walk into the hospital, even if they're not getting treatment that day. Another example is with pets. If a cat hears the sound of an opener every time it gets food, it will learn to associate the sound with being food. Over time, the cat will get excited when it hears the opener, even before the food is given. There can also be a higher order conditioning, where the cat can also learn to respond to other things, like a squeaky cabinet, if it hears that sound before the opener. Once a behavior is learned, it can also be unlearned. Extinction happens when the conditioned stimulus is presented without the unconditioned stimulus enough times and the conditioned response starts to fade away. When the bell rang and no food followed, the dogs eventually stop salivating at the sound of the bell. However, Pavlov found that even after extinction, the learned behavior could suddenly return after a break. This is called spontaneous recovery. In classical conditioning, sometimes animals or people react to things that are similar to the conditioned stimulus. This is called stimulus generalization. For instance, if a dog learns to salivate at the sound of a bell, it might also salivate at other sounds that are similar. On the other hand, stimulus discrimination is when the animal or person learns to only react to the specific conditioned stimulus and ignore other similar stimuli. Classical conditioning is an important concept in psychology that helps us understand how living beings, including humans, learn from their surroundings. Pavlov's work showed how behaviors can be shaped by experiences, and his ideas continue to be useful in many fields, from education to therapy. Through classical conditioning, we can see how habits are formed and how they can be changed over time. This is Classical Conditioning from Kettle Academy.